I'll pull it forward. Okay. I'd like to call the regular council meeting of December the 13th to order. We are honored to gather on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. Approval of the agenda is first item.
Move approval with late item 6.1.
Second. All in favor? Carried. Minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
All in favor? And receipt of committee minutes.
Move receipt.
Seconded.
All in favor? Carried. Next, we move on to delegation. That council received the delegation from Molly Hudson, Director of Sustainability, and Colin Cosman, Land Use Forester of Mosaic Forest Management, regarding update on community and operational activities in the Cumberland region.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Welcome, Molly. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you, Mayor Baird, and good to see you all. Good evening, everyone. Everyone can hear me okay? Yes, great. All right, so thanks again for this invite. We had a meeting with Mayor and Clayton a few months ago and talked somewhat casually about some of these things, and the Mayor made the great point that it would be good for us to come here and talk to the council as a whole. So really appreciate that invite. We're always happy to talk about our activities. So if we go to the next slide here, I'm going to provide you just a bit of a reminder on a company overview. It's probably been a few years since one of our representatives has been here at council. I'll talk a little bit about community partnerships in Cumberland. We'll talk about the Variance Watershed Initiative, which I believe you've had an update on, but I'll cover it from Mosaic's perspective. And then I'm going to pass it on to Colin, who's going to give you a little bit of update on the operations that we have in this area. And then, of course, I hope we'll have some time for questions and discussion. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Mosaic. So folks would have been familiar with Timber West and Island Timberlands, our predecessor companies. Mosaic came to be in early 2019. When those two companies came together under common ownership, you see there that our BC and federal public sector pension funds are our owners. We are 100% Canadian owned, and we're responsible for the forest planning, operations, and product sales on a large area of private forest lands south of Campbell River all the way down to Souk, as well as a couple of crown licenses north of Campbell River, TFL 47, and a few forest licenses as well. We also market wood for other folks, so that might be First Nations licenses, it might be small private landowners, it might be other crown licenses. So that is an important way that we connect with organizations outside of ours in the forest industry here on the coast. Our forest lands on Vancouver Island are primarily second and third generation forests. We're a second growth forest management company, in particular on our private forest lands on southeastern Vancouver Island. Our business is really based upon these tenets of responsible stewardship, and those tenets are certified externally by a number of certifications that I'm going to run through here quickly. So firstly, our ISO 14001 certification is our environmental management system. It requires that we adhere to principles of continuous improvement and managing, ensuring that our systems make sure that our day-to-day operations adhere to all of the regulations in our jurisdictions. Our Sustainable Forestry Initiative certification is our forest management certification. So this is kind of the system of environmental and forest practices that covers wildlife, water quality, relationships with First Nations, sustainable harvesting practices, and engagement with communities. PEFC is our chain of custody certification. This allows us to sell our sustainably harvested products into international markets. So if we were to sell a log overseas, that PEFC stamp certifies that our practices here on Vancouver Island were sustainable. And finally, and really on the kind of exciting proactive front, we've done a lot of work in recent years on the forest carbon front and on our organizational carbon footprint. So an organization called the Carbon Trust has certified the work that we've done to quantify our carbon footprint, both the carbon that our trees sequester and our emissions from our operations across our entire organization. So we know where we stand related to carbon. You can see the carbon cycle at the bottom of this slide here. And, forest management has a really important part to play in climate solutions as these trees are out there every day sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere. Our products put long-lived kind of carbon storage into our homes, and now we see mass timber buildings and other things like that in BC, which is really exciting. And so we're the first forest company in BC to engage in this kind of end-to-end carbon footprint work, which we're really excited about. Just wanted to highlight a few of our sustainability achievements from 2020. This is getting a little bit stale. Obviously, we're working on the 2020 report right now. And you can see this on our website at mosaicforest.com. But a few of the ones that might be of interest is that I'd like to share is that over the last number of years, we've had a concerted push to reduce our forest residue pile burning. And so over the last 3 years, kind of around the neighborhood of 10% a year, we've been able to reduce the number of piles that we're burning out there in the forest. And we think this is really important. It's going to become even more important as we see the provincial government has announced through their Clean BC initiative that by 2030, they hope to nearly eliminate that practice in BC forestry. So we're well on our way, and we're investing in things like more chipping machines and things like that to reduce pile burning out in the woods. The other thing I want to highlight that we achieved recently is silver level in our progressive Aboriginal relations. This is another certification standard led by the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business. And it really kind of crystallizes Mosaic's commitment here that you see in the top, recognizing the rights of Indigenous people and our commitment to participate with them in a positive shared future in forest management. And so down at the bottom there, you can see some of the Mosaic staff with Comox First Nations chief and elected councillors, as well as some of their staff. And the folks from the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, a really exciting thing that we did a couple of years ago where we worked with Comox to get their forestry practice or forest management certified under the same standard that we're certified under. So they're also an SFI member. Now, getting into Cumberland a little bit, we take our kind of good neighbor commitment very seriously, and this is obviously a community that values recreation quite highly, amongst other things. So I'll just highlight that the Forbidden Gravel Experience is something that we hosted on our lands this year, along with other landowners, and we really like to support events like this, BC Bike Race, other kind of one-time events. You can see on the bottom photo there a shot from our donation to the Cumberland Food Share Program. And we're also working collaboratively with folks from the CVRD and Vancouver Island University to do research on the larger Comox Valley watershed. So you can see that clip from a little while ago where we installed a new climate and weather station on our lands up in the upper reaches of the Comox watershed to assist with some of our forecasting as well as climate monitoring. And that data is publicly available through Vancouver Island University. And then I can't come to Cumberland without shouting out one of our marquee partnerships here, and I see the sign behind me as well with the Trail Network. This is a partnership that Mosaic is really proud of. It was initiated with Timber West over 5 years ago. Other landowners, the village, and the United Riders of Cumberland, they're just an amazing partner. We're really proud that we've been providing kind of safe, maintained, organized access to our lands to the kind of economic benefit of this community, as well as, getting a really exciting foundation for how we can be successful with these community access agreements. And we really took this model and brought it to other areas of our land to start to work with other community-based organizations to provide safe and sanctioned recreational access. And this is a great photo from this year. You can pick out Colin, who's going to come up next in the middle there, and one of our general managers, Aaron, riding with the UROC folks in jerseys that we sponsored, with UROC on the front and Mosaic on the back, and they were kind of podium prizes for various UROC events. So we're excited to see those around in the community, and we've even spotted those UROC Mosaic shirts down in the Cowichan area on some of those bike trails as well. So great to see that partnership, providing a model for other similar partnerships on Vancouver Island for us. And so Mosaic and the Village of Cumberland have had a strong working relationship for many years, and we've met annually, particularly on the water purveyor front. So the Village of Cumberland's watershed, some of that is owned by Mosaic, and so as a landowner, we made it regular practice to meet with the water purveyor, the village, every year to discuss our mutual interests in the watershed, including any upcoming harvest plans. And also, always looking for opportunities for educational initiatives, tours, other kinds of conversations as things come up, project-based work. But what we're excited about now is that strong relationship has led to the development of, this new initiative that you would have heard staff speak about recently, I believe, and has the partners listed on the right there that came together to focus on what do we know about the watershed? What do we still need to know? What data can we collect together? What data already exists out there? How can we focus our management into a scientific basis, collaborate on future projects and monitoring, educational opportunities, and obviously future planning. And so what's great about this initiative is that it's a proactive approach. It's collaborative. We're all sitting there in the room together talking about what our organization's priorities are. And it's forward thinking. We wanted to get away from this reactive kind of process and talk about what long-term we can do together in the watershed. And, if you were to ask why would Mosaic want to be a part of this, this is a voluntary thing for us. I have lots of good reasons, but I've highlighted a few things here. There's a process alignment piece, right? There's lots of projects that we're going to work on with the Village of Cumberland, and having this kind of group together allows us to put all those projects on the list, prioritize them, allocate resources, set timelines up, really brings that collaboration to the next level. It provides Mosaic operational certainty. We want to know that our activities in these areas have been shared to the communities, that the community understands what our activities are going to be. They've asked all the questions and we've provided answers, and that allows us to plan our activities in a manner that ensures that our contractors get to keep working and we're aware of what's coming up next for us. And then finally, we want to strengthen the relationship that we had already built with Village of Cumberland and take it to the next level and find out what else we can do together once we kind of hit those early, data collection, work plan kind of goals. We'll be looking to go above and beyond that. And really, it's just the early days where we work together on this more detailed level. And I think it's a really positive step. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Colin, to talk a little bit about some more operational updates. Go ahead, Colin.
Thanks, Molly, and thanks everyone for having us here this evening. So just wanted to talk about forest protection and coordination for a bit. To no surprise, we had the 3 or 4 day heat dome last summer. And so we had meetings and worked collaboratively with the Village of Cumberland, the Cumberland Fire Department, Mosaic and Hancock, of course, were at meetings, and UROC also participated in those weekly meetings. So really important for us to manage the wildfire risk, manage activities on our land base, and also the public activities. So every week we had meetings last summer, and it was really valuable approach to public access decisions and collaboratively making those decisions. UROC was really valuable in monitoring the land base and putting up signs and having information on the social media and also on their website. Our security was very active throughout the land base, and even on some of my weekend trips and evening patrols, it was really nice to see the fire chief out on the Trent Main, really keeping an eye on activities and making sure that people were behaving well. And fortunately, the photo that I have here on the screen is in the Beban area. It's not on our lands, but it's a very small area where a fire did occur. And so it's really nice. Everybody can reflect on last year's huge wildfires in the interior. And I think for the Comox Valley, this one was probably less than a hectare. So really good that we made it through the fire season the way that we did. A lot of people make comments, and there are some complaints about gates, but again, gates and our security are a really effective tool for managing the public and behavior on our lands, and making sure that our assets are protected, but also protecting adjacent communities and infrastructure and parks and all those things. So a really valuable piece from last summer. One of the things we did see was some campfires. It's amazing to me how, there's information on the radio, TV, social media everywhere about the risk of wildfires, and we still saw people near the hydro dam having campfires. And so our security did address that, which was good. So again, made it through the summer last year. Just in terms of our harvest planning and road upgrades, so we're constantly engaged with UROC and providing information to them about our activities. They're also engaged with us. And just an example, the last few weeks they provided Mosaic with their annual trail proposal, let's say, for every year, which happens usually in the fall. So we've reviewed that and endorsed the majority of the trails that they're interested in constructing or rehabilitating or decommissioning. And so UROC's been really excited about that process, and I think it's really working well for everyone. When we do have operations on the land base, we do our best to schedule those so that there's minimal conflicts with other users. So the photo on the right is actually one of the trails that was closed, and people were asked to stay off of it because of the annual toad migration. And we had planned activities early in the summer, and those were actually delayed until late August and September, which really helped just manage the different interests on the land base, let's say, and those happened after the toad migration occurred, so that was a good thing. In terms of road upgrades, we have an area called VO92, which is beside Allen Lake Reservoir. And so the center photo that you see on the bottom there is road construction activities early in September of this year. And we had a professional plan done by an independent engineer. We had, during the construction, environmental monitors on site. Really nice to see. I was on site with this one, and I have background with erosion and sediment control training and activities around really sensitive sites. And so this one was really nice to see. The operator was had a lot of experience around watersheds, and they actually had vegetable oil being used as hydraulic oil, so it was a non-petroleum based product. So if any hose should leak or rupture, there wasn't any risk to the watershed. So really nice added benefit to this project that occurred. A lot of other activities where we minimized the brushing at this site, scheduled the work to happen before the fall rains, and have professionals involved through the whole process. And it's really nice when we see all the extreme weather events since September and all the major atmospheric rivers. And I think to date around the Comox Valley, all our operations have been really successful in not having any real negative consequences or any blowouts or impacts. So just is a good demonstration of all the work that we put into our plans and our projects and monitoring our roads. In terms of Cumberland area communications, so we're very active sharing information before we share it publicly. So prior to the road construction and activities at Allen Lake Reservoir, we did share this information with Mayor Baird and Clayton Postings. And, you know, the last time we spoke with them both, there were a lot of positive feedback and comments around just the process that Mosaic goes through and sharing the information prior to sharing it publicly, but also it's an opportunity for, I think, education and demonstrating all the values that we do manage on the land base and all the professionals we do have involved with planning activities and monitoring afterwards. So really successful approach there, I think, and I hear a lot of feedback from different groups. So it's nice that it's being well received. One thing I wanted to provide a bit of an update on is I did reach out to the village of Cumberland and UROC probably a month or so ago now about some brushing that we had planned for the Davis Lake Main, and both organizations were excited that we were doing that work in advance of hauling, just because it does really promote safe operations and safety for everybody. So whether it's the Village of Cumberland staff traveling on those roads, UROC mountain bikers, and I can speak for myself as a mountain biker, and I live in the Comox Valley, but you know, some of these areas where there are trails are very brushy. So UROC was quite excited about those activities and just improving the road before we start hauling probably in January or February. And we will be providing further notification prior to those activities. So with that, I just wanted to thank everyone, and if there was time for questions, I think we can take a few questions.
Yes, there is. I see the hands going up already. So, Councillor Sullivan?
Yeah, thanks, Molly, and thanks, Colin. Yeah, just give you guys some credit for your the amount of collaboration I've seen over the last couple of years. We've definitely had different experiences with different forest companies. So that being said, you mentioned proactivity and forward thinking. And I just have a question about your slash burning. You know, do you have to wait until legislation is in place? Could you maybe change your policies before 9 years from now?
Sure, yeah, great question. You know, the 30% reduction over the last 3 years was totally voluntary. So, you know, that already is an initiative on our books. You know, it takes, we are required to reduce the fire hazard under the Wildfire Act, right? So we do have to deal with that debris somehow. And so what we're doing now is, you know, building that capacity in chipping equipment and things like that, right? So we prioritize areas for areas where we can still burn and kind of not cause impacts to community, and areas where it's a priority for us to not burn those piles. And so the Cumberland Watershed is a great spot where we would prioritize for either salvage operations, for chipping operations, and you know, we will be more focused now than we were prior to, you know, understanding the Clean BC targets in reducing that further. But yeah, I mean, you know, 2030 is what the government has announced, but we were already well down that path, and we have all the intentions to continue down that path for sure. Thanks.
Councillor Brewer? Thanks for coming tonight.
You bet.
I'm really happy to see the collaborations, what with UROC and then the Western Toad Migration. My daughter was one of those people that went out to count on the trails.
Great.
And yeah, everybody was respectful. My question is, it seems to me difficult for local mills, if there are any left, to get supply.
Sure.
And also for people like me that burn firewood, next to impossible.
Okay.
Doubled it, because I don't know what happens. Where do you sell it? down
Sure.
the island? Like, do you
Yep.
have any mills? I guess that's the question.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to answer that. So Mosaic, we're a timberlands owner only. So we produce logs and other products that we sell to willing buyers. And the way that the legislation works is that all local mills have first kick at any logs that we produce. So any production facility here locally has first right of refusal, essentially, under the legislation to logs that we produce. And then, we have various larger customers, like some of the mills in Nanaimo and Ladysmith over on the mainland that we would send to. And then if logs are deemed surplus to all of those domestic needs, then we are allowed under legislation to sell them internationally. And so on your point around firewood and some of those kind of locally consumable products, we have a few ways that firewood kind of leaves our land base. One is through our various agreements with commercial firewood cutters. So if you call a commercial firewood cutter in the Comox Valley, you buy a cord of wood from them, they may have an agreement from us to get that wood from our land. So they're kind of going out further into the watershed. They're following all of our environmental and safety procedures to kind of produce a product locally. So that's where commercial firewood comes in. When we have blocks close to town, we'll designate them for community firewood. And so there's two ways we can do that. It's kind of a serve yourself kind of thing. You can go to our website. We have a section for firewood. You can print yourself out a little permit, and you can go to our designated public firewood sites. Or we often run those close to town sites as kind of community fundraisers. So let's say a hockey team or the Scouts will sell those permits for us. And so the community makes a little bit of money, and folks can get their firewood as well. And then we also have agreements with various First Nations for kind of annual firewood allocations as well. So that can take a number of forms where either we deliver or we designate a block to be a First Nations firewood block. So that's kind of how firewood leaves our land in one of those forms. But if you're looking for yourself, I encourage you to check out the firewood section of our website, and it gets updated weekly with new blocks that get posted for public firewood.
And what time of the year?
Councillor Sproul, would you use your microphone?
Sorry. What time of the year does that happen?
All year round except for the fire season. Yeah, so obviously in the fire season, too risky for folks to be out there quite often. But otherwise, yeah, we're updating it weekly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown?
Thank you. Thanks so much for coming. I did want to just say how much I appreciate the relationship you have with staff and our community stakeholders. It's really great seeing that relationship develop, and especially the work on the Watershed Initiative.
Thanks.
Much appreciated. I have a couple of questions. After this summer's experience with Lytton, I have become quite concerned about fires and the danger that they pose to Cumberland, given the lovely trees that surround our village.
Absolutely.
And I know you guys are focused on fire smart practices within the cut blocks, but I'm also curious about some sort of, as you know, we've purchased that first little block, which is our community forest. And so having some sort of fire break between that and the working forest.
Sure.
I'd love to see something like that, because,
Sure.
we would hate to lose our park.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
And I'm sure you'd hate to lose the trees on the other side of the park as
Absolutely,
well. And then the other concern I have is around herbicides.
Okay.
and herbicide use, particularly in the watershed, but all around are lots of those lands are used for wild harvesting of all kinds of things. And so if you can comment on those two things.
Sure.
And I have more if you can remember.
Do you want
all
me to
of them.
start and then we could go back?
Sure.
Okay, so on the fire smart practices front, yeah, great question. I'm from that part of the world, so it's very much on my mind as well. And I think that practices that are common in the interior, community wildfire protection plans. We haven't really thought about that on the coast very much, but it's front of mind more. And you know, Mosaic is absolutely willing to be a part of those conversations. And you know, I think, as I said about the Watershed Initiative, one of the great things about that group is that I hope that it can be kind of the project gathering place for some of these ideas that are, you know, either village initiated or a partnership approach where we can prioritize areas. And that's really a part of that Watershed Initiative, is to talk about what areas are our priorities for watershed health, for conservation, for wildlife habitat, for fire smarting practices. So certainly, you know, if we wanted to go down that path together, then I think that would be a good place to have that discussion in terms of prioritizing areas. We've also invested recently in partnering with one of our contractors to bring some thinning equipment into our kind of suite of tools. So rather than you know, the kind of more traditional tools that we use to kind of hand falling and mechanized falling, this would be a mechanized falling, but you know, with a stand left behind, right? A thinning approach, which is often used in these kind of community wildfire protection plans. If you know, meet a certain number of kind of stand objectives, can reduce the fire risk in those areas. So those are all things that we're absolutely willing to talk about. We share the concern about increased fire in the future, absolutely. On herbicides, so yeah, we have a number of tools in our kind of tool chest to manage competing vegetation. So we have requirements under legislation to get our crop trees going back in a certain amount of time, free of brush competition, right? That's the kind of driving force behind managing competing brush. And so one of those tools is herbicide. We also do a lot of manual treatments. And so in community watersheds, we use manual treatments as our primary tool because we know that communities have concerns around herbicide use in these areas. There's lots of great science around the kind of the selective way that we use herbicide. It's not a broadcast kind of methodology. It's a very focused to the brush competition, but acknowledging community concerns, it's we use manual treatments, you know, brush cutting saws kind of thing to deal with those kinds of issues in community watersheds most often.
Okay, thank you. And you also mentioned that I presume it was one of your contractors, the road builder, that was using vegetable oil. Which is great.
Yes.
Is that a requirement that you have inside watersheds, or was that just the choice of the contractor?
It's becoming more often something that we ask for. It's, you know, like with the chipping conversation we had and thinning equipment, you know, you need to have the contractor with those tools in their suite. But when we have them available, we can use them in some of these sensitive areas. And that's something that we do regularly at the company, is when we have sensitive areas, we're bringing in our contractors that know how to do that work and have the right equipment. So certainly it's something that we would prioritize in sensitive areas for sure. It's not available to us through all of our contractors, but yeah, as Colin pointed out, a really good practice that we like to see.
Yeah, I imagine they'd have to have dedicated certain machines that were. Okay, thank you. You know, it's great that we are building these relationships and improving practices. But I think, you know, to be transparent as leaders in this community, obviously what we'd rather see is not much logging at all happening, particularly in our watershed, but in the lands surrounding Cumberland. So thank you for your work with us and working towards better forests for everyone.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much. And on that note, I'll just say that I really appreciate the relationship that we have with staff. It's been a productive year and we've had a long, good relationship with staff, but I think we've made some big steps with the staff group here in this last year. So I very much appreciate that. Yeah.
Councillor Kettler?
Thanks. Not off the hot seat yet.
No, all good.
Thank you for coming.
Of
and
course.
Yes, it's great the way that you've worked with staff, and I appreciate that you guys trying to build your social license in so many ways. And I don't have a problem with any particular company, but I do have a problem with the Private Managed Forest Lands Act. Okay. And I'm actively pushing to get those changes happening. You know, some of the things in your presentation about carbon footprint, for example, you know, we were presented fairly recently that that the forests in our province that once were a carbon sink are actually now carbon emitters because of both forestry practices and fires and all those things that so we need to start really thinking differently about how we treat and manage our forests. I think that things can't, you know, you're a corporation, and as people know, the bottom line is really about profit and you know, a duty to your shareholders. And so I think that often can conflict with what local government is looking for as far as, you know, ecological services and public interest. Sure. And in that way, I think, you know, the forestry practices themselves, the practice of clear cutting, we know that it can do quite a bit of environmental damage, and I think that we would like to see more things that you're talking about, selective logging and partial logging, leaving trees in place for a number of reasons, including, you know, soil retention and fire reasons, to having also switching, you know, that the whole fire issue is made much worse by having monocultures. So if we would have, you know, a diverse amount of species in the forest, then it would also help protect against some of those fire issues. And then, of course, what Councillor Brown mentioned about herbicides, of course, you know, entering the environment is never great, even if you are only using it sparingly in our watershed. The use of herbicides and fire retardants are certainly a concern for wildlife and other things outside of the watershed as well. So so there is a lot of things that need to be changed within the Private Managed Forest Lands Act. One of the main things is riparian protection. We know that it's much less than what is currently on Crown lands, and of course they're reviewing the Crown land management practices now. So that will hopefully be increased, more protection for that. So the discrepancy between what happens on private land and what happens on Crown land will be even greater, which I don't think is a good thing at all. But I want to ask you a question about data sharing.
Would you mind if I just covered a few of those things that you
Okay,
raised
sure.
there before we kind of get into the questions? You covered a lot there, and I just want to highlight a few things. I mean, you know, Mosaic is very much a science-based organization, and you covered, you know, a lot of questions there, and probably not for today, but I'd be happy to share with you some of the scientific work that we've done with our partners and that we use to inform some of those questions that you have around coastal forests actually, and you know, kind of the net sequestration of forest products actually being a climate solution. That net sequestration out of forests is how we actually pull more carbon out of the atmosphere. And carbon in coastal forests, you know, we have the opportunity to create the sink here, you're right. So it's not the same as interior forests. And some of what I heard you say is coming from interior forest science, right? We don't have monocultures out here. So, you know, there was a lot in there that I'd love to kind of share more information with you on. And one that I'll just highlight because we're talking about watersheds today, and I think it's important, is so the Private Managed Forest Land Act has riparian protections in it, but the way that we operate on the land base is much higher than that minimum standard set out in the act, right? And for example, some of the harvest plans that we've shared with the village over the years, the riparian protections in those plans would be the same on Crown land, right? Because we're doing more than the legislation requires of us, and our internal standards are really science-based and meant to kind of provide that necessary protection for various stream levels. So just wanted to highlight that, you know, I understand that you're kind of following forestry in the news, and there's lots to think about, and, you know, I'm happy to provide some of the kind of scientific work that informs our practices as well, because it is well considered. We're, you know, 50, 60, I think we're actually 70 forest professionals, biologists, engineers at the company. And, the choices that we make on the landscape are for reasons more than just timber production. So maybe for another day or through correspondence, I'd be happy to share some of that work with you.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and
Right.
I know that you guys are trying really hard, and my issue is just that it shouldn't be a voluntary thing.
Sure, okay.
It should be mandatory, regulated.
Yeah.
That's what needs to
Okay,
change. And
yeah,
I
fair enough.
appreciate that you guys go above and beyond
Great.
in many instances. So,
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, back to the data sharing. So recently at the Regional District, we got a presentation from a forester that gave report cards for various streams in the Regional District, and basically an indicator of their health,
Sure.
of the stream health.
Yeah.
And there was an interest to do this more broadly with more streams and rivers. And I was wondering if you guys would be willing to share that data so that it could be assessed and input into a similar thing, a
Yep.
report card. Because it was really good to identify what streams are at risk and need rehabilitation, and what ones are sort of doing okay.
Sure.
And what forestry practices are happening around those streams. So,
Yep.
yeah, just wondering about data.
Yeah,
sharing.
we received the report as well. We weren't involved, but we did receive the report. And, some of the kind of, because it's done by a retired forester, some of the concepts are concepts that we use in our watershed management. The gap that I'm sure was identified was that they're kind of using Google Earth imagery and stuff, and we have, high resolution
Right.
remote sensing data as well as long-term field monitoring data, right? So, certainly that work that you saw presented, is work that we do internally to manage our watersheds to, various scientifically based thresholds as well. Within the Perseverance Watershed Initiative, we have, discussed that, data sharing is something that we want to address because, the village wants to understand what kind of information we have. We want to support the village in, managing your water infrastructure. So through kind of those organized groups where we've, the Watershed Initiative set out a term of reference, we have a very defined scope, we're asking very particular questions. That's where Mosaic would engage in those conversations around what data can we share, what makes sense to the questions we're asking here, and, what data are we going to kind of keep internally and maybe provide, resultant outputs, for example. So that kind of collaborative group is where we would have those data conversations.
Okay. But there is a willingness to.
Yeah, and we will likely reach out to the Beaufort Water Stewards, and they've already reached out to us, and we'll meet with them and have those similar conversations with them. But certainly the structure that we've set up around the Watershed Initiative is the kind of structure that we need to have those database transparent conversations.
Okay, thanks. And just a question about sort of just curiosity about how much the map that you showed, including Vancouver Island and a portion of BC coast there, how much of the log exports as a total is coming from Mosaic?
So I don't know about the total Mosaic's proportion of those total
Of the
exports.
province, yeah.
Mosaic's ratio, and we actually I may have shared with you when we met last year, we actually have a great website, go to it. We've done a whole page on log exports because we get this question a lot. So, there's graphs on that webpage would probably answer your question around Mosaic's proportion. But, our company, domestic international ratio, ranges 60-40 either side depending on markets and things like that. But as I said, all logs are first offered locally available, and anything that we are selling internationally is surplus to local needs.
Yeah, it's just because recently I heard, that over 80% of the logs are coming from coastal BC out of the province. So I was just wondering what
Yeah.
portion of that
Sure.
You guys were responsible
and that's
for.
because we're on tidewater, right? That's how, all of BC's exports basically leave from coastal BC unless you're going on a train to the States, just because we're on marine shipping facilities here at Tidewater. So,
Yeah,
And
I
that
think it
has to
was
do with milling
harvested from-
capacity and things like that as well,
Yeah.
right? How many mills are here and are asking us for those logs?
Yeah, so, yeah, just that, it was my understanding that those logs are being harvested mainly from coastal communities, and not from the interior as much. So I was just wondering if that
I
was.
see. So I don't know the proportion of
Yeah.
Mosaic coastally, but, that's kind of how our internal process works and what our kind of customer proportions are.
Okay, thanks.
Well, Molly and Colin, thank you very much.
Thank
We
you,
did
Mayor
go a little bit over time, but it's such an
Okay.
important topic to
Yes.
the community and to council.
Yep.
I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation. It hit all the high points of things the items that concern the residents. And I'd like to once again say thank you very much for your relationship with the village and with
Great.
our staff. We have presented the Comox First Nations on the work that we are doing and to the Comox Valley Water Committee.
Great.
So it was really nice to present to them and tell them all of the work that we have been doing in partnership with you.
Great.
And I would like to point out again that once again, you're taking a leadership role for a logging company to work with the community. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mayor Baird, and thank you, Council. Appreciate your time today. And my email and Colin's email is both up on the screen. We encourage you to reach out if we didn't cover anything today or you want any more details. Thanks again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
We have a little bit more time for Mosaic.
Yes, very important. Next, we have no unfinished business. Correspondence is Comox Valley Regional District. The council received the correspondence from the Comox Valley Regional District regarding communication antenna policy.
We receive.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. And what they're requesting is that the municipalities in the Comox Valley consider collaborating to develop a consistent communication antenna policy for across the valley. Comments? Yes?
Yeah, I think this is a really great idea. I know people are quite concerned about the radio emissions that come from these towers. And so I think a common policy would be very good. I assume that would come back to us through some sort of report. So I'm happy to move it unless people have more.
Okay. The only thing that I would like to add is that I think it's great that they want a communication antenna policy, but also it needs to include the ongoing maintenance of these facilities. And I know that quite often under the government rules, they have to test them on a regular basis to make sure they're within guidelines. And we have one here in our own community, and I have never seen any of those results. And I think it's really important that we get that information. So if that could be built into the policy, that be included. Okay. Any other comments? Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, just that really it's regulated by the CRTC and the basically they ask local governments just to certify that a public process has taken place. But I think the quality of public interaction and consultation isn't taken into account under current CRTC guidelines. So it's good for local governments to outline that themselves, so to make sure that there is consultation and that information is being incorporated into the plan and consideration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, Clayton?
If council wishes to add those items, if we could request just a resolution to that, and then we'll ensure that's part of that communication back to the CVRD.
Okay, so you'd like that in a resolution?
Please, thank you.
Would somebody like to do that?
I can try.
Yes.
That council refer the correspondence to the Comox Valley Regional District regarding communications antenna policy to staff and include a request for regular maintenance.
Updates.
Updates on the towers to be included, and also a fulsome engagement process be included.
Okay. Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, that council receive the Heritage Alteration Permit and Development Variance Permit 2714 Dunsmuir Avenue report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. So this application, there's a few things going on here. So what I was going to do is talk about the variances briefly first. And the reason I'm putting those first is because your decision on the variances can affect the Schedule A that might be attached to the HAP, and then talk about the HAP. So for the variances, this came to you before in November. So the first variance request regarding the parking is the same as what you saw at your November meeting. And there's a request to reduce the parking requirement from 22 regular stalls under the zoning bylaw by 8 stalls. So the applicant is providing 14 regular sized parking stalls on the property through their Klaus multi-park system, and wish to reduce the variance by 8. The effect of that would be the applicant has a choice to provide parking cash in lieu instead of parking. So if a parking variance is granted, that would mean that no parking cash in lieu is required for those 8 stalls. So that's one of the requests, and I provide, I'll maybe go that at the end, sorry. Then there's also a request to reduce the commercial loading stall requirement by 2 to 0. And it is difficult to accommodate that on the property, so the recommendation is to support that request, which would mean that delivery trucks may have to park in the lane on the side of the road. It's not ideal, but other businesses are making do with that situation, so it would require quite a redesign of the building if commercial loading was required on the property. The other request for special parking stall designations is to reduce them all to 0, so waive all of them. One is a stall for persons with disabilities, one a stall for pregnant women, persons with young children, one for an electric vehicle, a plug-in, and one for recreational vehicle or tour bus. Staff reviewed all these requests. We are recommending to reduce or waive the requirement for a recreational vehicle or tour bus, as it does seem not quite appropriate for that site. It's unlikely that that would be required, a requirement or a need that would arise as a result of this building. So it seems reasonable to waive that. The staff is also recommending that the special parking stall designation for pregnant women, persons with young children be granted. And the reason for that is when we reviewed that requirement in the zoning bylaw, it seemed to be something that's more appropriate for a large-scale commercial type development, like a store, like a superstore, or just to mention one, or a big box store where parking next to the entrance is a benefit to people with persons with young children or pregnant women. But in the context of the Dunsmuir downtown core, it's not clear that one area is better than another for that kind of parking because it's not associated with one large commercial outlet. So the recommendation is to grant that request. And then the last one, the special parking stall designation is for persons with a disability, and the staff recommendation would be not to grant that. So the Klaus multi-park system currently can't accommodate, the way it's planned, cannot accommodate a plug-in, cannot accommodate the width required for persons with a disability, that extra white spaces. So if the variance request is not granted, then as with the regular parking stalls, there is a cash in lieu option for the applicant to pay the cash in lieu for that particular stall. So the committee recommendations, this was also reviewed by committee. The committee recommendations for the accessible parking stall, the accessibility committee did recommend to deny that variance, and also recommended to, also recommend to deny the variance for the courtesy parking for pregnant women and persons with young children. So that is a different form of the staff recommendation. The committees generally seem to agree that electric vehicle parking was important in our transition to more of a carbon-free economy and environment. So the commercial loading stalls the waiver to the commercial loading stalls was also supported by the committees. So that kind of summarizes the parking. So the effect of the variance as recommended are highlighted in attachment 7, which is on page 80 of your agenda package. So the variance, if only certain variances are granted, namely no variances to the regular requirement of regular vehicle parking stalls, but variance to the commercial loading and the pregnant women, persons with young children stall, and the recreational vehicle stall, the cash in lieu option, the cash in lieu payable would still be $96,660 by the applicant, which would go into the municipal parking cash in lieu fund to fund future improvements for parking in the downtown core. So I can keep going through the other variants, or what is your wish? Do you want to do that? Let me go through it.
And then we'll have questions.
Okay. Yep. Okay, so the next one is the height. There is a height variance requested to accommodate the sloped roof portion of the building, and perhaps this would be a good time to put up the drawings that are. Yeah, thanks. The isometric drawings that the applicant submitted, we briefly saw last time. So the variance would be required. That sloped roof portion of the building is above height, especially the area of that sloped roof portion. Actually, that's close to where the elevator shaft and the staircase, the top of the staircase come out, which is the top of the yellow element there on that building. So the sloped roof was initially, the architect put the sloped roof on to screen the rooftop, those rooftop elements, which are permitted in the zoning bylaw to be over height. So staircases that have to exit at the top of the roof, and elevator shafts are permitted to be above the height, and associate with that. Oh yeah, great, thanks. Associate with that is a small hallway and also mechanical equipment that services the elevator. So this area here, this area is permitted by the zoning bylaw to be over height. The sloped roof was added by the architect for aesthetic purposes to screen this from say, if you're looking down Dunsmuir Avenue, if you're street level, you probably can't see that. See this element here that's over height if you stand here, but possibly if you're coming down Dunsmuir or from other areas in Cumberland from that side, you might be able to see the top. So this was partially for screening, and the Heritage Design Guidelines, Heritage Conservation Area Design Guidelines actually do recommend screening, but more in the form of a parapet. It's more specific there. So the architect envisioned this as screening, but also to add interest to the building, and fit in with some of the other different roof lines in the downtown core. We have a lot of flat roofs, but we also have some pitched roofs, like the big store, and the Riding Fools Hostel on this side has a pitched roof. So the roof adds it's an aesthetic element as well as a screening element. So the yeah, that's the variance for the roof. I think I've got that, everything I want to say about that. Yeah, the architect has provided a different an option without the sloped roof, which would then meet the height requirements of the zoning bylaw. Yeah, Rachel, if you don't mind, I think I provided one of those too. Then we can just look at that here. The alternative building designs are in attachment 5, starting on page 40, 43, 44, but I think we have it hopefully. Yeah, you just looked at that. And now yeah, so this is the rendering. So they also provided renderings that are more photographic for visualization of the building. So this is the requested, the preferred design by the applicant, and which was reviewed with the Heritage Committee. And then they provided, I think option B is the flat roof, which is, oh, I can go forward. No, yeah, oh yeah, I can, sorry. That's just the details. So there is the flat roof version. So this would meet the height requirements. Yeah. Okay, so staff is recommending granting the variance. Our preference is for the slope roof for the aesthetic reasons described by the architect. So the third variance request is for lot coverage. And the building itself has the zoning bylaw has a maximum lot coverage of 75%, and the building itself has a lot coverage of 68.1%. So the building footprint, yeah, and the parking garage has a lot coverage of 9.4%. So altogether, that's 77.5%. Of lot coverage. So the request is to vary, well, we round up, so we rounded up to 78, so the request is to vary that by 3% to reduce be able to increase the lot coverage permitted under zoning bylaw through a variance to 78%. The variance, the proposed variance permit is in the back, and you'll find of the report on page 84. It shows the lot coverage currently and the calculations, and the Klaus multi-park system is really what puts them over the maximum lot coverage of 75% by the 3%. So the zoning bylaw does actually allow surface parking. The surface park is not included in lot coverage. So if it was just flat and it wasn't a building, that would be acceptable under the zoning bylaw. But because they chose to put the parking into a building through that multi-park system, it puts the development over the lot coverage. Yeah, the staff recommendation is to grant that variance, primarily because the building is actually only the 68.1%, and the parking garage is a benefit to the residents on that lot, because then there's actually more parking available than if it was just surface parking. However, the applicant has said if council is concerned about the lot coverage, they would reduce the building footprint or the footprint overall of the development by those 2.5%, so that the development could proceed. So if the variance is not granted, the applicant would reduce the lot coverage. Yeah, so that's all the variances. So onto the HAP then. So the heritage alteration permit. Or you want to do the...
Yeah, let's take a break and do...
Take a break?
Yeah,
do the variances? Yeah, there's a lot going on, yeah.
Yeah, so Councillor Kettler, do you want to start?
Okay. Yeah. So I guess with the parking, yeah, I agree to deny the with staff's proposal to deny the request for the 8 stalls. But I don't agree that we should waive the special parking designation for electric vehicles or, oh, right, so that is something that they said to deny as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I agree with staff's recommendation on that too, to deny the waiving of the special parking stalls for persons with disabilities and electric vehicles. The height variance, I think a lot of the letters that we received asking not to increase the height, I think a lot of people had the idea that we could, by denying this, take off a whole floor, which is not accurate. So to me, I agree with staff that it's more aesthetically pleasing to have the slope roof. It actually, to me, it also fits better with the heritage designation area because it is trying to mimic the neighboring building. And so I agree with giving the height variance for covering those services on the roof and for the aesthetic value that it gives. Okay, so we got the parking, we got the height. Oh, the maximum area coverage I think is pretty minor, and I appreciate that they were trying to be innovative with that mechanical parking system, and I don't think it's worth redesigning for 3%, and I don't think it has any impact on the overall stormwater implications of the site. So I'm okay with granting that variance as well.
Okay. Okay, Councillor Brown?
Thank you. So starting with the parking, I agree with the staff recommendations, although as I understand, the Klaus parking system is EV ready. It's just not providing EV services right now, like in theory when it's built. So why would we not just require them to have the EV inside the building?
So just like the regular parking stalls, the special designation stalls, which is electric vehicle parking space, is a special designation. There's a cash and lieu option for those as well. So for the electric vehicle stall, the cash and lieu option is 24,000 or something like
Okay.
that. So they can exercise the cash and lieu option for that special designation rather than providing it.
Right.
If they had no option, then potentially they would have to upgrade the whole Klaus.
Yeah. So it's a problem
parking
with
system.
the cash and loop that
They
we
may
still
still
allow
do
the
that.
cash
I
and
guess
loop.
it's up to them to decide that then if they wish to provide electric plugins, but it would then be the entire system for the
Yeah, which would be great because it would encourage all those people to have electric cars. But we'll get to that when we do the VCMU1 zone review. So that's parking. Over the lot coverage, the thing about this building that I'm struggling with, or the thing about the variances that I'm struggling with, is we have in the VCMU1 zone provided a very friendly environment for developers. We've given 4 stories, commercial on the bottom, very low parking requirements, and we've seen that come into play already in the downtown core. We have 3 approved new apartment buildings that are providing new commercial area for businesses in the core. And so I see no reason that we would grant variances on lot coverage or height or over height for a building that will be the largest building in our downtown core because it's on a very large lot, and it is 4 stories. And we've seen the impact that even a 1-story or a single lot 4-story building has had in the core and the concern in the community. It is very possible for this for council to request that this developer step back the 4th story and to allow for a sloped roof and for the building to remain within the height that we allow in the zone. So I see no reason to vary that. The developers knew what the rules were when they designed the building, and they've chosen not to adhere to them. So I'm not in favor of the height variance at all. And the lot coverage, 3% is not a huge number, but when we think about the fact that that 3% could provide a space between the heritage building next door, which is built out of wood, that needs to be maintained, and that could allow for a corridor so that that building owner could maintain that building, or that space could be used as pervious area and be landscaped with trees or other pedestrian scale landscaping. I think, again, I see no reason to vary the lot coverage. That's all.
Okay, Councillor Sproul?
Well, this is one of the bigger, more contentious decisions we have to make. Excuse me, I've had a long day of meetings. First of all, it seems the height, the objections of the community have been towards the height, and I think many people thought we could change from a 4-story building to a 3-story building, but this is in the zoning bylaw. It's allowed, the size, but we have to think, even though the sloped, if we put a sloped roof in, even though it will make it a little bit taller, I've forgotten, is it 1 meter, 2 meters? It will give a better, more pleasing to the eye, and I think it will look better from a distance. So the other contentious issue was the parking spaces. The applicants wanted to be exempt from 8 parking spots, but I don't support that, because we're already having serious issues with parking, and people who want to put in hotels need to provide for the parking of them. So I would say that we need to seek cash in lieu for those 8 spaces. The lot coverage, I'm okay about the increase from 75% lot coverage to was it from 73% to 75?
No, 75 to 78.
75 to 78. Yeah, it would. I actually don't have a problem against that. And as far as the special parking for pregnant women, people needing accessibility, having accessibility problems, I think I'm prepared to exempt that, have including spaces for that, and for the commercial vehicle, will carry on, will, like many other businesses in Cumberland, get their stuff delivered by trucks into the back street just very briefly. They're not there for very long. Commercial loading, that's the one. And I think one of the biggest problems, though, is that people really are concerned about the future of Cumberland with the size of the buildings. They feel that it will be changed forever, and it will. But we, the Village of Cumberland, the councillors who are still working on this, we wanted density downtown. That's why we made the zoning bylaw. And we wanted to densify so that we would have less parking, just for so many reasons. And here it is, it's here, but we're not now sure if we want that. Also, it's too late to do anything about that now, but sorry, I'm having a hard time thinking. Yes, so it could bring more vibrancy. There was a letter, most of the letters we got, the emails, were actually totally opposed. But you could look at it at the other side. It will be a bigger village, may attract more buildings of the same size. But as this person says, densification to the downtown allows not just for the success of shops, businesses and public amenities, but also encourages growth. The vibrancy of our village depends on the presence of people in the downtown core. And altogether, there could be a whole new social interactions on the main street with, cafes. We fear the most because it's so, the worst because it's so different. But, and I do appreciate that the applicants have tried to listen to us and our concerns about heritage and have made some changes already. But you'll never be able to recreate the Cumberland Hotel and all the atmosphere that goes with it and all the vibrancy. So I don't have anything more to say on that. Thank you.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks. Okay, as far as, I agree with staff to waive the special parking designations for recreational vehicles and tour bus and the loading stalls. Last time the report came, I wasn't into a height variance, but then it became more clear to me what was happening. For the village's benefit, there's no way we can remove a story from this building. I wasn't interested at first with a height variance, but now seeing that mostly it's an aesthetic covering of the heating systems and stuff above and with the slope roof, I'll support that variance. The lot increase size I support simply because 68% is the actual building, and as Councillor Kettler mentioned, I'm pretty impressed with the elevator, the car elevator. I think that's progressive and more of the future of Cumberland with our parking difficulties. I do not support a variance for the 8 stalls, and I don't support waiving the special stall designations for the electric vehicles either. There we go.
Thank you very much. This has been really difficult, and I think one of the reasons why it's so difficult is the other developments we had on the main street, there was no pre-existing building. This one is removing the Cumberland Hotel and having a new building in its place, and I think that has touched a lot of people. And so it's been a really difficult back and forth decision, but I will support the sloped roof at 17 meters. I think that it adds character to the building, and I think it would fit in there nicely. And Councillor Spruill, you were absolutely right. We did this all to densify the downtown core, and at the time we had no opposition from people in the village. I know there's been quite a few people that have moved here since then, but that was the purpose of it, is creating a more active downtown core and supporting the businesses. I am fine with the increase from 75 to 78. That is not a huge difference, and I think that would be appropriate. The other two, I support staff in their recommendations. Yes, Councillor Brown?
Thank you. A couple of things that I just wanted to revisit. So just to be clear that providing density and 4 stories does not does not require a variance. It was completely within the developer's creative capacity to develop a building that was 4 stories tall that did not need a variance to cover the servicing on the roof. So there's that. I am concerned about deliveries to the alley. I doubt that that is terribly feasible, given that there's just a very narrow walkway or the sidewalk. So it's likely that the businesses in the commercial will have trucks stopped on the main street. It's not the end of the world, but just to point that out, that that it will be an impact because of the nature of the building and where the alley is in relation to where the commercial buildings are needing to be delivered to. And just to revisit the public is concerned about the height, and council is right. We have allowed for 4 stories in the downtown core for very good reason. We are densifying the downtown core. That's the purpose of this zoning, and that's what's happening here. And it's our job as council to weigh the cost-benefit analysis to the community when we look at, particularly at variances, and it would should this building be providing affordable housing, or maybe it was, a geothermal heating system, or maybe it was, solar powered. That would change the cost benefit analysis for me, but it's none of those things. It's a for-profit building that is as big as it can get. It's actually needing variances because it is oversized. And that's not the intent of the zoning bylaw. That the intent of the zoning bylaw is to allow for 4 stories, not 4 stories plus, and 75% lot coverage, not 78, and 22 parking spaces, not 14. So I think we've been quite lenient already with this, and so I'm not in favor of the variances.
Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, just, well, we've been given the artist's rendering there of what a flat roof looks like compared to the slope roof. And so I think that, when you are balancing those values, you end up getting a better product with this variance. And I think that's what my decision is resting on, is that it is a small increase in height, but at the end we get a better, more aesthetically pleasing product. As far as, densification and what we could get as far as affordable housing or environmental benefit, those things are come at rezoning and not at the request of a variance. And so I'm fully in favor of taking a look at our zoning for VCM U1 again, and whether we should reduce that height so that we can have those conversations about density bonusing and get those extra community benefits. That's we learn as we go, and so I'm happy to look at that again. But as it stands, those are not things that we can request at variance. So.
Yes, Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I'm not sure I spoke to the 4-story thing accurately. While we can't ask for fewer stories, we can ask that the developer step back the 4th story and still provide a pitched roof, which is what they are required to do with the heritage alteration plan. So while we are grateful that they are following the suggestions of the heritage alteration plan, they are required to do those things. So they're not doing us a favor. This is what we ask for in the zone, and that's what they're providing. And we could ask further because of the impact of the 4th story on the corner of 2nd and Dunsmuir, which is opposite 2 of our most precious heritage buildings, and the heritage alteration permit specifically states that buildings, that the scale is the most important of the considerations for new buildings in the HCA, and that they are to complement the existing heritage buildings, which of course this one doesn't. So we could ask them to step back, and they have a very good architect who's designed a beautiful building, and I'm sure they could do the same with a stepped back fourth story on the corner and a pitched roof.
Thank you. Any other comments from anyone?
Are we going to
Gonna do it more, or what?
move the variant and then go to the heritage, or?
Let's finish with what you were presenting, Karen.
The other item that's part of this staff report is the heritage alteration permit that is required in the historic downtown, in the heritage conservation area that's in the downtown core. So the full review of the HCA guidelines and what the architect provided in response to the different guidelines was provided on August 9th. Part of that staff report. Staff did review the guidelines as well in this staff report, and that's provided in following the report. Starting on, there's a lot of appendices. I think it's appendix 2. Sorry. So I think what I wanted to do is just highlight a few key things that came up at the last meeting, and one of the key ones was that the request was that the architect explore provide an option with an awning, and they did provide that option. And maybe we can put the images back up if that's okay. The one that says building options. Yeah. So this is the recommended option, and was also the initial option. I think the renderings have really helped see that the building is stepped back on this side of Dunsmuir Avenue, and then balconies that recessed balconies, and then they're stepped back there. But yeah, this is the drawing. So I'm just going to jump through. So that was the option for the flat roof. They did provide an option with an awning. So what happened when they added the awning? Of course, they had that row of fake windows. Fake windows. Well, they're backlit. So these are actually, it's all part of the first story, one story. So while it looks like this is this is a second story. That's not the case. Not a separate story. The second floor starts here. It's set back a little bit and sitting a little bit behind this, which is sort of almost like a balcony. It's higher than the where the floor starts for this. The floor for that starts about here for the second story. So this is kind of it's a design element to continue that roof line across and provide these fairly tall windows above the commercial space. So when an awning is added, then these windows disappear, and that's partially, partially as the architect explained, we have requirements for the maximum height difference from the sidewalk to the bottom of the awning, how far the awning can stick out, and because the street goes down a little bit, they have to follow the minimum height difference from the bottom of the sidewalk to the awning. So that's why we end up with this. What looks like maybe on one end a fairly high awning. Mm-hmm. So this is fairly high up here on this side. Oh, well, actually, this is actually the higher end. Yeah. So So yeah, we're losing the windows up here. So it's a little bit of a difference in design. That's one. The rationale, the architect is preferring their initial option, and provided quite a bit of information on that, and that's on. I can't express it the same way that they did, so I provided with the quote on page 31. One was from simply a management perspective, so they were concerned about, excluding birds is always a challenge with awnings. The potential for icicles, the heritage conservation bylaw specs that don't actually allow the awning to go to the drip line can't go to the edge of the sidewalk. So we're requiring, I think it's 1.8 meters, and it can't go further than that right now, according to the guidelines. So this is kind of the cross section of the awning, what would happen there. So that's a maintenance concern, is the icicles and the birds that sometimes nest under the awnings. You have to find a way to
Speak to this at some point.
Generally, the maintenance of the awnings over time was a big concern.
Sorry, I was trying to speak to this.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, when she's finished.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll try to sum up. So there the concern is of course tying the awnings into the side of the building and into the building envelope. So it's possible. It's really also an aesthetic consideration. One other consideration, they pointed out that the sunlight coming into this commercial unit, because there's also that recess area in addition to the awning, it'd be less natural light coming in because of the awning when the sun is high in the sky. So those are some of the considerations.
Let her finish, Sean.
Oh, I didn't have this. Oh. You can hear me. Okay. Yeah, probably pretty muffled. If you heard any of that. Yes. Yeah. So those are some of the considerations when it comes to awnings. The Heritage Conservation Area Design Guidelines, when it talk about awnings in terms of providing the specifications that I mentioned, but also when they talk about awnings in the context. It talks about awnings in the context of remaining examples of the storefront design incorporating large glazed display frontage, awnings and signage indicative of the late 19th and early 20th century pioneer style. So when staff looked at this again, we thought, well, it seems that guideline may be more applicable to existing buildings. We don't actually have a lot of awnings in downtown core, so again, it's really a question of preference. The staff recommendation is to go with their proposal, which does not include an awning and has the higher windows up here for continuing with that. It seems to fit the building style that they have better. So I think that was kind of the key element that council was concerned about and wanted to have an option to look at, and nothing is better than getting an option, and the rendering really helps see the impact of the awning on the building and how it changes the building. But like I said, it's an aesthetic preference. So yeah.
Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks. Ironically, I'm not an architect, obviously. I was talking about awnings on the upper floors. So I was kind of surprised to see where, I don't know if that's even feasible, but looking at that wall of windows on the front face, I was imagining just maybe little short guys for some aesthetic purposes, not anything what they rendered here remotely. So that was just my take on requesting awnings. I think this awning is terrible compared to the first rendering, and I agree with all the points. More so I was just kind of thinking on the actual building rather than the streetscape, or the street side personally. Yeah, and further, just what the architect wrote about the awnings. I mean, I can accept all the reasons in the bullet points, bird poop, icicles, danger, maintaining awnings and such, but I was really disconcerted to read kind of the disrespectful nature of the comments of the architect. That he would no longer be proud of the design and it would be unfitting with our brand. Well, our brand is Cumberland, so you're here to fit into our brand. That's just my comment about that.
Any other members of council? Yes.
Just a comment back to the beginning, somewhere through here, so it's not the beginning, but the applicant has pointed out that this is a mass timber mixed-use building, and it's apparently one of the first buildings of its type to be constructed in Canada. I was curious to know, are the beams, the posts, are they from the local area? Is it okay to ask the applicants? Because I know that down, yes? Sorry?
Yeah, from within.
Oh,
There
okay.
isn't a mass timber manufacturer on the island, so
Oh.
there's not a structure land in the common.
Still, it's a really nice aesthetic
Yes.
to have wood.
The entire building is constructed out of mass timber, so it doesn't need traditional construction. These
So-
would actually, just like the last resident was talking about, is part of a greater carbon sequestration.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else have any? Yes, Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, I don't really like the awning, but I am concerned about the landscaping, and I don't know if we're going to talk about that more, but I would definitely want to see the conceptual landscaping that they have. I think that's really important, that there's more green on that building, and I think actually this awning would take away from that main balcony that has most of the green for the building. So that's sort of a negative in my view, so I'm not supportive of the awning.
Yeah, and I looked at the awning and thought of the building next door, and it's out of line with what's next door.
I wish I was more specific about the awning. but
Yeah.
I don't think that, I was just only talking
No.
about the above
Yeah.
building, so, yeah.
That's fine. Okay,
Is it?
so the greenery.
Yeah, so the greenery, so this did come up in comments that we received as well, of the concern that there was no landscape plan attached. So it's not a typical.
There's nowhere to
no,
landscape.
You know, there's no extensive landscaping, right? So the landscaping, when planning staff looked at that, whether to require a landscape plan or not, and it's really part of the building. So it'll come forward as part of the building permit application. So, but to make sure it does come forward as part of the building permit application, doesn't disappear, I did put in the heritage alteration permit, because I understand the importance of that, a condition to be met, that permanent planters integrated with the building will be as per Schedule A architectural drawing. So currently that the option with the sloped roof is Schedule A of the building, of the HAP, which shows the planters up here and the integrated with the building, and the planters at the entrance and down below. So the ones on the balcony, I think that is decoration. That's not something we can control from the building permit, but it's part of the building. So the reason not a separate landscape plan hasn't been requested is because it is part of the building. Yeah, so it really it was good to understand though the importance of that from some of the people who wrote in and also this evening from council. So to make sure we all, it's clear that it can't just, it is part of the building. We did put a condition in there. Under a 2C, permanent plant is integrated with the building will be as per Schedule 8 architectural drawing. So come forward as building.
Okay, Councillor Brown?
Yeah, a couple of things. I agree about the landscaping. I think there is still, even if council grants them the 78% lot coverage, that leaves the remaining percentage up to 100% to landscape. So there is space in the back, and trees along the alley would be great. And landscaping in the back would also be appreciated. I'm just curious, in a process way, we generally refer variances to the Advisory Planning Commission, and that is not one of the recommendations, and I would suggest that they might like to see this, and given the contentious nature of this build, in the community, it might be good to get the APC feedback on the variances as well.
I thought thought they did that.
The APC received the parking variances and
But
had
not the
commented.
height or the lot coverage.
Not the height or the lot coverage. That's
Which
right.
is what the
well, they
concern
would
is.
have. So the Heritage Committee viewed the building designs, and the height is more related to the building design, which the Heritage Committee comments on, and they did review this. So, and I suppose they saw they would have seen the original lot coverage. Until then, last meeting, we realized the parking garage actually has to be included in the lot coverage, hence the required variance at this late point in the time.
I have one question concerning the balconies. Whose responsibility is it as to what is placed in those balconies? Because these are going to be seen from the main street, and I know we didn't do it with the other buildings, but is there something that you can do so that it doesn't become a storage unit for the people living in that?
It will be a strata, correct? Right. So the strata rules really usually prescribe what you can or can't put on the balconies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what is your pleasure? Yes?
Finished?
You're finished? Yes. You had your hand up, Councillor? Is that what your question was?
I had my hand up.
Yeah, so did Councillor
Oh, sorry.
Kettler.
Oh, I was just going to move things, but go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to suggest that we refer the height and the lot coverage variance to APC.
Seconder?
Can I ask a question?
Yes?
When's the next APC meeting?
Would be in January now. So second Thursday in January.
It would have been better to do this earlier.
We didn't
Not
know
sure.
about the variances earlier.
Oh, okay.
What is your pleasure? Is there a seconder?
I'll second it.
Seconded? Okay, any other further discussion? All those in favor of it going to the APC for the heights? Opposed? 4. Okay, thank you. Defeated. Okay, moving along. Does somebody want to move?
Can I ask another question?
Yes, you can.
Didn't talk about the name. Is that a part of this?
They changed the name to the Cumberland.
I don't like that name personally. I just like to speak about how I do not enjoy that name after sitting with it for a month. I just think there's something better. If we're going to replace something as iconic as the Cumberland, I don't think taking this building, which is beautiful, and naming it the same name is appropriate. So that's just my opinion. I think there's there's a million different names we could choose for that building instead of the Cumberland. That's just my suggestion.
Well, I think because they're doing the commemoration inside the building,
It's appropriate.
it's more appropriate.
Okay.
They do have some of the
Okay,
pieces of the old building that they'll be within it, so.
Well, hopefully that would be significant enough to make it worthy of the name then.
I think it'll help to just, the site's already referred to the Cumberland.
yeah.
You know, it
It's
keeps
just-
that social.
Just kind of bringing it up
Yeah.
for convo here.
Okay, someone, yes, Karen?
Yeah, if I can make a suggestion. So one of the conditions in the permit, and that's had been discussed with the applicant, is that there would be a commemoration plan of the old Cumberland Hotel, which identifies some of the ways that the old hotel can be celebrated or referenced in the new building. And the applicant has had a couple of suggestions. There's a commemorative plaque in the old building. There may be components of the bar that could be reused in some way in the new building. And there's stuck saw blade in the joist or in the ceiling.
Rafters?
Rafters, thanks, in the basement. So they've had a few suggestions. So I think that will go to the Heritage Committee, and we're actually for some suggestions and discussion. There'll be a little bit of discussion with the Cumberland Museum and some research on how best the building could be commemorated. So we could make the naming part of that and encourage the applicant to consider then perhaps further discussion on the name.
Okay,
Sound
thank
good?
you.
Yeah, we actually had a few people say the same thing, and and we think that probably there's a process for some
Thank you, but we will continue with our meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
That was my fault. I
Yes.
looked that way. So yeah, I think doing that as part of the commemoration plan would make a lot of sense.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what is your pleasure, council?
I'll move that council approve the heritage alteration permit for 2714 Dunsmuir Avenue, properly legally described as Lot 1, Block 6, District Lot 21, Nelson District Plan 522, west one half of Lot 2, Block 6, District Lot 21, Nelson District Plan 522. And that council approve development variance permit to vary zoning bylaw number 1027, 2014, to waive the special parking designation requirements for recreational vehicles or tour bus and for pregnant women or persons with young children, to waive the requirement for 2 commercial loading zones, to increase the maximum height of the building from 15 meters to 17 meters for the sloped roof portion of the building, and to increase the maximum lot coverage from 75 to 78%. And that council deny the request to vary zoning bylaw number 1027, 2014, to reduce the regular parking stall requirement by 8 stalls, and deny the request to waive the special parking stall designation requirement for electric vehicles and for persons with disability.
Seconder?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next, that council receive the minimum frontage requirement exemption 2798 Alverston Avenue report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Council. So the village has received an application for a 4-lot subdivision at 2798 Alverston Avenue. Proposed Lot 3 does not meet the minimum frontage requirement as required by the Local Government Act, Section 512. The purpose of this report is to seek council approval to reduce the LGA frontage requirement from 10% to 4.6. So council has previously seen this property come before them. A prior version of the application proposed a 7-lot subdivision that required a variance to allow for the lane to be considered highway frontage instead of Alverston. Council denied the variance, and the property owner has amended their subdivision and reduced it from 7 lots to 4 to ensure that all proposed lots have frontage on Alverston Avenue. The approving officer has been delegated by council the authority to reduce the Section 512 minimum lot frontage requirements under certain conditions. However, these conditions do not apply to the subdivision. Therefore, approval of the reduced lot frontage pursuant to Section 512 requires council resolution. And staff does not or did not identify any practical reasons to deny the request. And over to you.
Councillor Brown?
Thank you. I thought this looked familiar. So I'm curious about the configuration of the lots. I note that lot 4 is like a short little lot, and then lot 3 is a giant sprawling lot that goes all the way back along the alley to the neighboring property. And I would hate to see something come forward in the future once we subdivide this that is a request to have an access from the alley to the, as I understand, each of these lots could house 3 dwellings. And so I wonder if the configuration is meant to allow for access off the lane to additional dwellings on that lot number 3. And is there anything we know about that, I guess, is my question.
I'm not going to make any assumptions based on the applicant's plan. They haven't specifically said that. However, ADUs, we do allow lane access if the lane is wide enough and it works for it. So potentially they could have 1 ADU with lane access, but it would be on a case-by-case basis.
Right, so that lot number 3 could have the existing dwelling that's there and then an ADU, but...
And they could have a secondary suite in the main house.
And they could have a secondary suite as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'd have to meet the lot coverage and size requirements and everything like that.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I don't see that this has gone to the APC. Is there a reason why we're not referring this?
No, I I think maybe because I think I didn't refer to APC. I mean, that is an alternative for council if they would like to refer to the Advisory Planning Commission. But because it's come before you, I don't know.
Didn't we refer it last time though?
We denied the last
It was
request.
denied the
Denied
last
it,
time.
right.
Yeah, for the 7 lot
Yeah.
with frontage on the lane. Yeah, if Courtney wants to add to that.
I just add to that that typically I would not recommend referral of a frontage variance to an advisory committee because it's considered to be a very minor thing. In this case, certainly it's in your authority to make a decision, but I consider it almost like a technical decision in this case because the frontage does meet the zoning bylaw requirement, and this is a requirement in the Local Government Act that has to be waived.
That sounds good.
Okay, what is your pleasure?
I'll move that council exempt Lot 3 of the proposed subdivision of 2798 Ulverston Avenue from the 10% minimum frontage requirement pursuant to Local Government Action Section 512 to allow a frontage of 4.6%.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
That council receive the reserve and surplus policy amendment report.
First seat.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight I'm presenting to you an amended reserve and surplus policy for your consideration. And if Council does approve those amendments, then I'm also seeking direction to make the recommended changes to the bylaws, 2 of them in the amendment. And sorry, just bringing it up. Somehow I lost it. So in the amended bylaw, most of the changes are in Appendix A of the, or sorry, in the amended policy, most of the changes are in Appendix A. And so really what the reserve policy says is that I will analyze it annually, and I haven't done that since the end of 2018. I have been analyzing it annually, but I haven't made any changes to it. And so with the changes that I've made is mostly to the how it's calculated just using the current financial plan. It was time to increase those minimum and optimum levels in your policy. To match your increased financial plan operating revenues. And so the other changes to the policy are sorry, just one moment here. The other changes are to the financial stabilization reserves. And so what I've been looking at over the last couple of years of using those reserves is just understanding that they do not, the minimum and optimum levels do not allow me enough of funds for when I'm trying to stabilize revenues for your user rates and your property taxes. And so what I've done then is just added some language there that that allows those rate stabilization funds, and that includes any kind of grants that you would receive, like the COVID grants where you have a couple of years to use them and you have to reserve those funds. Just allow those to keep those out of the optimum and minimum levels so that I'm not transferring those out to capital reserves, and we can keep them until the level of revenue that's required is hit. And so then the other section is for that is that the percentage of your operating revenue, I've asked to increase the percentage of that for your levels. And that's because I saw over the last couple of years that is if you use the percentage base that's recommended in those policy levels, for a small organization, you don't actually get the dollar amount that you would need for the same type of cost pressures that we would have. A larger organization would get them because they have larger revenues. So I'm just asking to increase those percentages, and then we'll continue to look at that, and I'll come back to you if it's not, if it needs to be different. But for now, that's what I'm asking for. The other changes that I'm asking for is some just housekeeping changes for language consistency and other type of stuff. And then for the capital reserves, again, what I've done with the minimum and optimum levels is I have used replacement values, because back at the end of 2018, we only had historical values to use, and so the policy allows us to use the historical values if you don't have replacement, but now we have replacement values, so those have increased as well for that. And so finally, I believe that's, yeah, and then so finally the other change that I'm recommending is that we separate the facilities out of the general village asset reserve. So the original policy, we were just having general village assets. That's all of the assets due at the village. It allowed us lots of flexibility. But I'm realizing now, because the facilities are now getting 5% of tax revenue contributed to a reserve for them because of them being so far behind, that it's probably best that they have their own reserve. And so that's the other change I'm recommending for that. And then the linear infrastructure asset renewal reserve, I'm just asking for some language changes with that to add capacity building, and of course to acknowledge that it's a linear infrastructure asset renewal instead of just regular infrastructure. So the building of capacity will allow you to use it, use those funds to review your asset renewal plan, your program. That's where you're smoothing your engineer tech costs into. So you want to make sure that the reserve allows for that, and also capacity building like master plans and stuff should be really funded from there. So. So that's as presented tonight, and I did also attach some reserve fund balances, which you've seen with your financial plan as you've gone along as well, and I can answer any questions.
Any question, Councillor Kettler?
Yeah, just comment. I really appreciate you doing all that. Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, we haven't reviewed it since 2018, you said, and certainly with things like replacement value, that's definitely changed in that time. So I'm glad that you're looking at that and bringing that up to date. And also, I like that you are parsing out the facilities for us. We know that our facilities are very old, our buildings, and that they will need a significant investment soon. So good to keep on top of that as well. So thanks so much.
Thanks. Councillor Brown?
Yes, reiterating the appreciation for your attention to this. I agree, we need to bump them up substantially. And I also just want to make sure the public understands that we actually are putting funds away in stabilization reserves so that we are not having to increase service rates massively when we do upgrades. Like, so you have the example in there of stabilizing the 375,000 increase to sewer user revenues to operate the new wastewater treatment plant once it's built. That would otherwise increase sewer user rates overnight. So this is the way that the village is planning to keep taxes down for our residents. Just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that that's what we're doing here.
And just to add to that through the mayor, that's when we do know the costs. So if we have enough lead time for those costs coming up, which we did happen to for this one, then we can build those revenues up over time. So it's great if we can get a heads up, but sometimes we don't have that opportunity. But yeah, for sure, it's a better way to go.
And so doing that again for the policing and
Yep.
like,
Yay, reserves.
yay, reserves for everyone.
Saving for a rainy day. Or tsunami.
No one else? There is a recommendation there.
All right. I'll move that council adopt the amended reserve and surplus policy number 3.5 as presented. Based on the adopted reserve and surplus supply, the council directs staff to amend the following bylaws. A, establish the general fund municipal facilities asset renewal reserve and adjust the language of the general village asset reserve to remove buildings from this reserve in Schedule A of the reserve funds establishment bylaw number 1113, 2019. B, add language to the infrastructure asset renewal reserve establishment bylaw number 1046, 2016 to add to the purpose of the reserve for capacity building and clarify that the reserve is for linear assets.
Seconder? All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much, Michelle. That was a tremendous amount of work.
Thanks.
Next, council reports. I assume that all the other councillors will be verbal.
Where did the time go? It seemed that we'd just done our reports, but that was
And
last week.
yes, I think this is one of the longest reports I've ever done. It was an extremely busy month. And I'm certainly not going to go through all of it, but if there's anything in there that members of council wish to question me on, please feel free to do that.
Just a minute.
It was a lot of fun doing all these things, but it was time consuming. I did attend quite a few AGMs, and it was really interesting. One group, the person that had the key to the facility thought it was the next night. So they held their meeting outside. And they had a wonderful time. It was a short meeting, but they had a good time. So you never know what to expect. Okay. Councillor Kettler, did you want to add?
Yeah, I guess some things of note. I met with Ministry of Environment. We talked about watershed protection and in particular as it pertains to forest practices. We had elected officials forum on transportation through the regional district. We had a renaming event for Morrison Creek Headwaters, and it's now called Kachmot, and it means place of medicinal plants. And we had a really good experience with Walk With Me. A bunch of elected officials were invited to go and walk the streets and hear stories of the unhoused people and people with barriers, and it was a really moving experience. So, yeah, thank you.
Well, I will compliment the regional district. I've never attended so many meetings in a month. And they were very big meetings. They were just not short ones. Covered numerous topics. And I think the community-to-community forum was excellent. And it certainly was very heartwarming to hear some of the stories. Yes, thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thank you. Yeah, I attended one of those CBRD meetings for the EOC, so that was fun. I really enjoyed the museum tour. We all did, I'm sure. And anyone from the village who has not seen the museum needs to do themselves a favor and go check it out. The Comox Strathcona Hospital Board last month had the 2022 provisional budget. Our requisition was $411,000, which makes up 3.3% of that budget. We had strategic planning, we had some implementation considerations, and the board directed that further assessment and analysis be undertaken in partnership with the island to develop a supporting service hub in the valley evolving and expanding clinic grants in rural, remote, and Indigenous communities, and supporting long-term care in Campbell River. So the board voted to move ahead with creating a hub in the valley, which will house some alternate care facilities for mental health and different aspects that don't fall necessarily under acute care that are filling up the hospital quite a lot. So it's really great to see the progressive nature of the board and the staff of the CVRD starting to really make some good changes moving forward. And yeah, it was really impressive. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, apologies for not having a written report. I don't even remember all the things that happened in November. There were a lot of them, keeping up the work with the Substance Use Committee, and also attended the Walk With Me event, which at the time one of the attending councillors from Courtenay said that we had quorum from all local governments, and I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate the collaboration in the Comox Valley around this work, and looking forward to Cumberland's contribution to the next phase. So that, and I did attend CCSS's AGM. I believe that was in November, so they have a bright, shiny new board, and managed to pull off an extreme event this past weekend, and it was just really struck me how the nonprofits in this community contribute to the quality of life here, and so lots of love for those community events, and for CCSS putting that on for us this past weekend.
The volunteerism is quite amazing here.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Councillor Spruill.
Yes, apologies also for only having a verbal report. I don't know if my voice is going to last to the end of the sentence. Yeah, the Heritage Committee continues its good work. It's actually really fun because we're constantly brainstorming and branching off, and it's just become altogether very lively. The museum opening was wonderful. We have a world-class museum now with world-class curators. So that is going to draw a lot of people this summer. Drinking water protection, that was really interesting, the regional district. Budgeting, the winter fair, community to community, that was really not profitable, but really well thought out. It was thoughtful. And active transportation recently, which I hope will lead to better routes for cycling and walking into the neighbouring communities. So let's hope something comes out of this. Thank you.
Okay, can someone move the reports?
Move that we receive the reports.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next, we have bylaws. That council receive the 2022-2026 financial plan bylaw report.
Move receipt.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Good evening again. So the financial plan bylaw in front of you is almost the same bylaw that you saw on November 22nd. However, it does have included in it a $30,000 operating budget for your for the urban tree bylaw update, and it has funding against that from transfers from reserve for the host amenity. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So I can answer some questions, and Clayton actually can talk about the urban tree bylaw as well a little bit. But I just wanted to let you know that it is in the bylaw because my understanding from what I heard at that meeting was that you possibly would want it in the bylaw if it was possibly able to be worked in the work plan and also be able to be funded. So at this stage, that's why it's in. However, the council resolution in the alternative selection section can be used if you actually don't want it in the 2022 bylaw. If you want to move it back to 2023, you can use that resolution. And we can just keep moving on from there. And Clayton, did you want to add anything?
So the, as requested by council, so staff did go take a look at exactly how this may fit within the financial plan. And I think it was mentioned last time, certainly when we developed the plan, we put all of the, the projects and initiatives together and try and give ourselves some capacity to be able to address if there are additional initiatives come up. And, certainly if council wishes, this is, one of those examples of one that we want to make sure we have that capacity for that. We did speak with a consultant that has managed this process before, and I think where we are right now, it is I don't want to call it, it's a process that is fairly straightforward. However, there's a lot of community engagement, and that does, we do have a year with a number of projects such as Transportation Master Plan, Arts and Culture Master Plan, so that's a year of a lot of engagement, and that was something we factored in, in putting this into the financial plan. But the one thing I just wanted to mention, and we're confident that we can deliver on it, but it does create a bit of risk in the, if some emerging item comes up that hits, then I just, at that point in time, I would, just want to be able to come to council and say, we may need to be able to adjust our priorities if that comes, and we certainly will come as staff to council and, present that. But there's not a lot of room. We're already pretty tight, but this makes it really tight. So if there is a chance, if there is an emerging item that does come up in the near future, but certainly through our quarterly reports, we'll keep council up to date, and if there is something, at that point in time, we can speak to council and get direction if something needs to be adjusted. But I think we're able to do it. But I just want to be clear that there is some risk associated with adding this item to the work plan there.
There's a risk not to.
Okay. So
Sorry.
Any further questions? No? Someone want to move 7.1?
That council give first, second, and third reading of the 2022 to 2026 financial plan bylaw number 1152, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
The other bylaws are on the agenda just for adoption.
Yeah, you just moved them.
Read them.
No, she doesn't read them out. You do.
He says for us to read.
Yeah.
That council adopt sanitary sewer rates amendment bylaw number 1155, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next.
That
Oh.
council adopt the sewer frontage
you.
tax amendment bylaw number 1156, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Solid waste amendment bylaw number 1157, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next.
The council adopts stone frontage, I hope I've got the right one, tax
Yep.
amendment bylaw number 1158.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
That council adopt water service frontage tax amendment bylaw number 1159, 2021.
Seconder.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next.
The council adopt water rates amendment bylaw number 1160, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Next.
Revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw number 1154, 2021.
Second.
All in favor? Carried.
Council gives second and third reading to council procedure amendment bylaw number 1153,
Second.
2021. Second.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. The last one.
That council adopt the 2021 to 2025 financial plan amendment bylaw number 1161, 2021.
Second.
Second. All in favor? Carried. Well done.
It was like a choir.
It's around the horn with some bylaws.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
the first time for that.
There's no new business, no notice, motions, and announcements. It's question period. So please send your questions by email to info@cumberland.ca using subject line question period. Please limit your questions to questions only, and comments will not be read. And while we're waiting, I'm going to say, on behalf of staff and council, we would like to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This is our last meeting until the next 2022. And it has been a pleasure. It's been a really interesting weekend with the CCSS Fair or Village Square project they had down at the park. It was so nice to see all the people out celebrating. But please be aware of COVID. We are still have to be very careful and very aware of our surroundings at this point. And just wish everybody a very successful and happy and safe Christmas.
Here, here.
Thanks.
Okay, Mayor Baird, we have two questions so far. One regarding the, I believe, the variance for 2714 Dunsmuir. What are the ceiling heights in the new Cumberland building? If they're 10 feet, could they not be reduced to 8 foot to accommodate the sloped roof?
I've already asked that question at one point. Of course, they're not here tonight, right now.
If you allow, because the question was provided earlier, I did send it to planning staff.
Oh,
and they-
good.
and they
Please
are
do then.
Able to answer if that's okay.
Yes.
The answer is there are 3 meters, which is 9.8 feet between floors. And given that the floorboards, fire separation, and ceiling tiles all take space, the rooms are estimated at 9 feet high. The zoning bylaw requires the ground floor to ceiling height be 4.2 meters, which is 13.8 feet, in keeping with the historic commercial spaces that had high ceiling heights. The high ground floor to ceiling height requirement on the ground floor takes up a good amount of the building height as well. And the second question, I'll just repeat that because here, if they are 10 foot, could they not be reduced to 8 feet? So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but I think it gives some background information there.
Okay, is that
Okay.
yeah? There's nobody left in the audience, so we're okay.
There was a question about why the applicant was allowed to speak during the meeting.
Yes.
That was an accident.
The first time it was a question, the second time it was an accident. Okay? So close the meeting to the public.
I'll move the council close the meeting to the public to pursuant to section 90 of the community charter to consider labor relations or other employee relations information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages and that in the view of council could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public.
Second.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.